If you are new to HDK, if you don't know us, we are a digital agency specializing in websites and digital marketing for arts, culture, and heritage organizations. And we spend a lot of our time helping organizations think about how digital expectations are changing, how they used to change, how they will change, from audience journeys and content structures through to accessibility, sustainability, and increasingly using AI. So today's session is really about sharing some of those conversations, some of the experience that we have, and questioning the things that we're trying, that we're experimenting with, and what we're seeing emerging in the sector right now. So joining me today, I'm very happy to welcome back Ben. For those of you who've been to our webinars before will remember Ben when he was a project manager here at HDK. He will be telling you a little bit about his business, but also what his observations are in the sector and in the industry at the moment. Also joining me is Eche. She is our new web project manager and is going great guns with some of the projects that she's picked up. And again, someone who's using AI daily in the way that she works, and we'll be sharing some of the things that she has experienced. And also John returning for a second webinar, our web support manager, and we'll be showing again, bringing that experience of supporting our clients through their websites and how AI is transforming that as well. So those are the panelists. They will introduce themselves when they get to speak. For myself, I'm a male in my mid-50s. I have got a trimmed dark beard, shaved bald head, brown eyes. I'm wearing a brick red short sleeve shirt today. And what we're planning to cover, you will have seen in how we promoted the today's session. We're going to start off with a sector overview a conversation I'm going to have with Ben. Then Ejay is going to talk about some tools that streamline website workflows. John is going to pick up on tools to improve the impact of your website. And I'm just going to cover off a little bit on ethical and sustainable use of AI. And then hopefully we've got plenty of time for a discussion where maybe, I know there'll be a lot of experts in the room here today with us. So we want to hear from you. What are you experiencing? What questions have you got? We'll open them up to anyone who wants to help answer those questions for you. So I'm going to start off with a conversation. I'm going to bring Ben back into the conversation now. And Ben, we're going to talk about what's changing and why it matters. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you're doing at the moment in AI?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Hans, and thank you everyone for coming today. My name is Ben. I'm a ex-project manager at HDK, but now I'm a co-founder and director of product at my own company called Synaptics. We're building operational AI for venues, which is deeply integrated into ticketing and box office systems, primarily as a customer service tool at the moment, but we're also looking at various other workflows to streamline operations there. And so I'm really excited to talk to you today about how those two things are kind of interlinked. Sorry, I need to also introduce myself. So I have black hair, I'm tan skin, I've sort of got a goatee that I keep trying to grow into a full beard. I'm wearing glasses, I'm a man in my early 30s. So yeah, that's me. The company's called Synaptics, and I'm really excited to talk about how what we're observing in both sort of the discovery of websites and how that ties into a sort of a more holistic experience that audiences are sort of starting to engage with now. So yeah, back to you, Hans.
Thank you, Ben. And why I was really keen to bring Ben into the conversations because Ben and I had great conversations when he worked at HDK about using tools and the latest technology, and certainly when after he's left HDK, he and I have been keeping those conversations around AI going as well. So I'm very glad to have you here. I guess also, Ben, what I appreciate is that through your work and through your business, it's taken you out to lots of conferences. You're talking to lots of clients out in the sector. So I guess my first question for you would be, what audience expectations are changing fastest right now in terms of how people want to interact with arts and culture organizations, and particularly online?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's quite a funny one, this first one, because it feels like everything's changed, but also nothing's changed at the same time. We were just talking about how a couple of years ago we were all talking about the metaverse and really sort of preparing to jump into that world. And what I'm sort of finding is that the way audiences are engaging with content is slightly changing in that it's kind of been forced to change from things like Google using AI overviews or using ChatGPT to plan a day out. And now really the way you're trying to optimize for that is to be found and to be talked about in a positive way, which is not the same as sort of a click-through rate. And John's going to talk about that a little bit later. But by the same turn, the marketing strategy hasn't changed, which is just show up where people are wanting to find you. That's really the name of the game. And so I think the medium has changed and will continue to change, but I think the core goal is kind of the same. And they're just for there's a link going to be sent out. There's a really interesting report from One Further, which sort of does a deep dive into how AI search overviews from Google are really impacting the arts and culture sector.
Yeah, and we'll share that link with the handout that will follow this webinar. So it'll be sent out, it'll be emailed to you. Yeah. So I guess the next sort of thing I was interested to talk to you about was where do you think organizations may be underestimating the impact of AI, underestimating the impact that AI could have on ticketing in particular, and that's your area, and customer experience and digital journeys over the next few years?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest change we've seen is really just the conversational interface, and it feels kind of second nature now a lot of the time, and we've all kind of got over the fact that you can talk to a computer, but really, this is a fundamental change in how we use technology, and it has already brought, but will continue to bring huge benefits. I think primarily from an access perspective. So booking tickets, I'm going to talk about sort of high intensity purchases and low intensity purchases. And what I mean by that is buying a t-shirt on Amazon is a relatively low intensive purchase. Buying a group booking for ticket for your theatre or a day out is actually a very high intensity process that needs a lot of concentration. You might need to pick your seats, you might need to pick your add-ons, and we're working on ways to sort of streamline that through conversation. And we really think that that's going to bring huge opportunities from both a commercial angle to be an easier checkout experience, but also from an operational angle, because you might ask follow-up questions at the same time, such as, how far away is this to the train station, or is this a wheelchair seat available to me? That sort of thing. So that interface change is actually gigantic. And then from the operations side, we truly feel that there's a huge case for sort of capacity building and capacity enhancement in your team, which is, you can run uh, uh, jobs on a schedule. You might, get a raw Claude to draft you a blog post every week that otherwise would be left to someone, and maybe that person's on holiday this week. So there's a huge amount that can be done through this natural language. Possibility, I guess. Yeah, so that's there. I can talk about this for
Yeah, yeah,
weeks. So
yeah. But where do you think AI can genuinely improve things for audiences and teams, and where do you still think the human element really matters?
well, for audiences and teams, for audiences particularly, I think we really feel it's the customer service angle. Small teams are now able to offer 24/7 customer service at scale, and that's not really been a possibility before without significant expense. So that's my strong feeling there. For teams, again, I think there is so much in the workflows that you'll be doing day to day anyway that can now be either accelerated or supported. And Etche is going to talk about sort of the first draft idea a little bit later. And then, so Hans, what was the last part of that question, please?
Yes, of course. Where do you still think the
The
human
human
element?
element.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the human element, I think it was a very interesting conference at Business of the Arts last week. I think everyone's aligned in this sector, I think specifically, is that the generation of sort of artistic content or anything that's creative. A red line for me personally is like I will never really use it to generate a video or an image of a human. I don't really know where that might change in time, but because I've seen some experiments where people have used AI to accelerate the production of what they were already doing. But generally, and that's just me, that might not be the case for others in the room. But I think the human element, having that taste, the expertise of knowing what you want to achieve, that's a human thing. And it's going to be incredibly hard for AI to get there, as much as the AI bros will tell you otherwise.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah. And then just one final question before we move on. If someone in this webinar knows they may be reviewing or redesigning their website in the next couple of years, what should they already be thinking about now?
Yeah, so it's interesting that when we were talking about this, Hans and I were talking about this, I sort of challenged and said, well, anyone can build a website now. And Hans sort of said, yeah, but there's so much that we offer. And both things are true. And I think it depends on your scale and ambition. For example, yes, anyone at this point could knock up a website. No, will it be a good website? Will it be completely secure? Will it be SEO friendly, accessible, have everything ironed out? No, and that's kind of a hard truth. But I was really interested to hear that HDK had taken on a project recently where the client had already come with all of their prep work done. So they'd thought about their brand, they thought about their copy, they thought about their site structure, they thought about their design and how they were going to talk to their users. And all of that work is quite intense human conversation work. It's team led. There'll be various stakeholders throughout the organization. And that work can now be done much quicker so that HDK and other people, other web developers or whoever's building the site can get to work and just bring that to reality much faster and with a higher impact. So that I've just found that sort of shift fascinating. That's not to say that there won't be more work in that discovery process, but it was a really interesting take that the all of the same things that you need to build a website haven't changed, but they can now be done quicker and with more thought because the process has become faster.
I think that's a good point there, and I think with websites in particular, there's so much that goes into them. Um, but what we now have the ability to do with AI is really get structure really right. They're often for all big organizations, they're trying to service so many parts of the organization. They're supposed to suit different stakeholders, but that clarity of trying to think about your end user and what they need and what they want, we can now do a lot more to really work hard for those people as well.
And generating options. It's not the case that now you could have just two options to choose from. You could have five, eight, 10, and sort of just keep tweaking until it feels really right. And that process, yeah, having that to hand is now super invaluable, I think.
Right, thank you. Well, thank you for that, Ben. That's a great insight into what you're doing and what you're coming across at the moment. You're going to stay around for the discussion. We might go over the hour just to let people know. And Ben's very kindly happy to hang around for that as well. But I think what we want to do now is maybe move on to some of the practical things that people can do and the things that we've been thinking about and working with. So I'm going to hand over to Ed J for this.
Thank you, Hans, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm Ajay. I'm a female, mid-30s. I'm wearing a white shirt, and I have black curly hair, which is just below my ears. And at HTK, I look after web projects. And Hans and Ben, they just covered how AI and like audience expectations are shifting, and made the case for like why this all matters. And I know I'm aware, which is what I feel sometimes, that like sometimes AI conversations can stay like really abstract. So I just want to get into the how and like give some practical examples where AI can help you and like and save time for you. From the poll that we've seen, some of you will already be using AI for like content tasks, which I'm going to talk about, like content tasks around my slides today, and maybe some of you won't have started yet. But I think either way, what I want to do is just give simple, free and non-technical practical examples that you can just like try out this week. Before I go through the examples, I just want to frame what we are really actually like talking about. I think I find the value of AI in content tasks isn't that it produces the finished work, but it removes the hardest part of like starting. So you never have to really like start from a blank page again. But I think the most important bit that we need to remember is you need to make sure that you edit the draft that AI has given you so that you don't sound generic or like everyone else. And I think more importantly, like AI. So these are the 4 areas that I'm going to cover. They are pretty straightforward, easy to start with. Repurposing event content, which I find it's useful for arts organizations mainly. Alt text and image captions for social media, metadata and SEO copy, and finally drafting web copy. So the first one is turning event content into web copy. I think this one is like really relevant for arts organizations because you put on events and talks or panels, and so much of that content just like disappears or it just lives on a video somewhere, which is a 2-hour long video that not many people have time to go and watch. I think where AI comes in here, that it makes it very quick to turn that video or a recording into a web article or like a news post that you can post on your publish on your website, and then people would have another way to access that content in a 10-minute read instead of watching a 2-hour video. And I think the workflow is here quite very simple and like free. All you need to do is just get the transcript first. So you can use that recording of a video or audio to upload to any sort of tools. But for a video, you can use YouTube. It generates a transcript in seconds and then paste it into your favorite AI chatbot AI tool, and then ask it to create a web summary, pulling out like 3 key themes, for example. So you don't upload the video, but you upload the transcript. And now you would have a draft that you can edit and publish about your event or panel. And as always, I think it needs a human review. AI doesn't know your brand voice, and even if it does know, it will still sound like AI or generic. So I think the most important part is like you just need to review it and make it like your own copy. Again, as mentioned, it's not just about videos, but we can also use this for any sort of recordings. And there are so many free tools out there like Otter AI or Happy Scribe, which we're going to share in the handout we're going to give after this with the links, and you can just go and try them easily. So this is what it looks like on YouTube. So when you go on YouTube, you can just click show transcript, and it would just give you the transcript of the video. It would just auto generate the transcript, and you can just copy paste and use it for your own copy. And then what it would look like on the left, we see a rough transcript, which is what comes out of like a recording. And on the right, we would see what AI produces when you ask for like a web-ready version. Obviously, it's not perfect copy. It sounds like AI, but it's like a solid edit to start with. Again, it needs your own brand's voice or like what's actually meaningful or true for your organization. So it needs a human review. So the next one we have is alt text and caption. I think it covers like 2 separate tasks that I think they have something in common. They are both things that we all know that we should do, but sometimes we can find like tedious at scale. Alt text obviously matters for accessibility and for SEO as well, and captions matter for reach and connection on like social media. So what we do here is, again, pretty simple. You upload the image, run the prompt that you need. You can say, for example, for an alt text, you can say, write an alt text for this image for an arts organization website under 125 characters. You can obviously tweak these prompts, and like I think the prompt is quite important. Whatever you give, that's what you would get. And then once you get the results, you can just adjust for your context and then edit to your site. So another option would be here to use, instead of using AI chatbots like ChatGPT or Claude, you can use plugins like alt text AI. That would generate, every time you upload a media to your website, like an image, it would generate the alt text for you. But again, in the end, you just need to go and review it because it doesn't know your brand. So, for example, if there is a caption, it says an alt text says person, maybe it needs to become a soprano, or it needs to become the person's name. Next, we have like just 3 examples that I just uploaded to Claude, I believe, and then asked it to create some alt text and like Instagram caption. You can see that the alt text is like descriptive and specific, which is actually good. But I think here again, as I mentioned in the previous slide, like you may want to change the dancer to the name of the person, maybe, or add the name of the building for the second one, because AI wouldn't know that what that building is from this image, if it makes more sense for your content. And the caption for the concert image is actually not too bad. There's a point of view. It's not just describing what's in the photo, but I think you still want to tweak it to fit your voice and like add more details about the concert. But as a starting point, I think it's pretty useful. Next one, which is not so fun to do, maybe like the not like the others, but it's like meta titles and meta descriptions. Obviously SEO affects how we appear in search results, which John is gonna touch on that a little bit later, and how AI and SEO are now changing. But then still we still need to think about SEO and like meta titles and descriptions effects. But they can be tedious to do at scale, so sometimes we just skip on them. And I think AI is well suited to do this exactly because it's like repetitive and structured. So here's the workflow is, you again upload your copy to any AI tool, prompt AI to create a meta title and description. So instead of having just 2 words of meta title and no meta description, now you would get something meaningful, and then you can use it to increase your SEO. For example, in the next slide, we have an example where you would have a meta title, it's just a summer festival, and meta description would be blank, but it's after AI, which would take probably 10 seconds of your time. You would have a bit more meaningful, and then it would obviously increase your search optimization results. And then I just found a real example, like from the Barbican here. On the top, you can see how their what's on page appears in Google search results. That description underneath the link is their meta description. And in the highlighted in yellow in the second image at the screenshots, we can see that meta description. So it is clear, I think it tells you what's the page is about and who is it for, and like, but we could actually make it better, I believe, to give what's on info in the current time and like in the meta description instead of a generic sentence. But at the same time, not every organization has this filled in, so having some information there is always useful. And I think AI can take this to a next level without adding too much workload. And finally, we have something that I think the most common use case and like the easiest to start with. You don't really need anything polished to draft or refine a web copy. You can just paste in bullet points or like rough notes and then like ask AI to give you a draft. But what I find useful AI in here is goes beyond giving you a draft actually. Like you can ask it to rewrite the same page for a different audience or from a different angle. You can paste in an existing copy, ask it to challenge you, which is what I do quite often, and ask it to tell you what's missing, what's unclear, what would a first-time visitor not understand. You can even ask it to play like devil's advocate and like poke holes in like what you've written. And I think the key shift is that you are having a conversation with it rather than just asking it to produce something. And I find it very helpful when it comes to content writing by using it as like different personalities or audiences, and would highly recommend giving it a go. And the take. So I think everything I've just shown works best when someone with experience or like enough context is reviewing the output. So yeah, it doesn't know your voice. Even if it does, still it will still be a AI, or at least at the moment, this is what we are seeing. It won't know your audience well enough, like you, or what's actually really like true, or what really matters about your organization. And I think the skill at the moment we see is in the editing, and that's like that would be where your value sits. If you do it well, I think AI gives your team capacity to work to focus on other stuff. But if we do it poorly, and I think that would make our website or our work sound like every other or like AI. So that's AI working behind the scenes. Excuse me. Um, and I'm gonna hand it over to John, and he's gonna take us into the next layer, which is AI that your audience interact with daily, like chatbots, analytics, search, and what's changing in how people find your website in the first place.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Etche. It's lovely to be here again presenting on one of these webinars. My name is John. I am a man in his 40s with brown hair, glasses, and I'm wearing a blue shirt. And as Etche was saying, I'm going to look at some tools to improve the impact of your website. Before we look at the tools, I just wanted to talk about some of the criteria we use to select what we're going to talk about today. And that is that we wanted to talk about things or recommendations that you can use immediately. So i.e. not tools that might help build a website, and also non-technical, so no developer is required. There are some integrations, particularly with AIs like Claude, that would require a developer. So we wanted to present recommendations that pretty much anyone can get going with. So those will be AI chatbots for troubleshooting, Ask Analytics, AI search optimization, and we're going to look at a WordPress plugin called AI Experiments. So the first of these, AI chatbots for troubleshooting, it was interesting at the beginning of the webinar to see the poll, and that about a fifth of people would say they haven't done anything to do with AI yet. This is definitely the place to start, using an AI chatbot, and troubleshooting, whether it's for a website or an email campaign or whatever you've got going on. You'll find that AI chatbots have really come along. A really common example for us might be something like cookie compliance. So a cookie banner may have scanned a website, found a new cookie, but there's no description available, which is not compliant. Every cookie needs a description so that when people are making their choice to opt in or opt out, they can tell what the actual cookie does. Previously, this might have been quite a big research job to find out what the cookie does, go to the original supplier of that cookie, see if they have it on their website. For anyone who hasn't used the chatbot yet, which is about a fifth of you, this is what it looks like. You very simply can ask a question. Sometimes you don't even need to ask a question. You can just put an error code in, or you can put in the name of the cookie ID in this case, and you get a really clear, concise answer. The other benefits of using a chatbot in this way is because it's conversational, you can then follow up with other questions, and it knows what you're talking about. So you can end up having these really long chats, and they're very direct. They give you singular answers very often, rather than links to websites that might have the answer. So if you haven't used AI in any way before, this is definitely where I would say to start. And this is what people talk about when they start to talk about things like prompt engineering. How do you ask a question to get the best answer out of the AI chatbot that you're using? Where that then takes a next step is that those chatbots now sometimes are being integrated directly into products. So instead of saying, taking a copy and paste and putting it into Gemini. Gemini actually exists in a product for you to speak to. One of the more recent additions to Google Analytics, which I'm sure a lot of you are using, is a feature called Ask Analytics. So here is our Google Analytics screen, very familiar to most people. In the top right-hand corner, we can see a kind of sparkly icon, and this kind of star sparkly icon has kind of become shorthand for AI here. This is an AI feature. So if I zoom into that, that's currently what it looks like. Google do like to play around with their icons, so it has changed in a couple of days. But when we click on that, we get this panel on the side, Analytics Advisor. Now, anyone who's used Google Analytics knows that there is a bit of a learning curve. You do need to understand reports, pages, you can get into funnels, but there's quite a learning curve there. With Analytics Advisor, almost the entire learning curve has been taken away. If you know roughly the data that Google Analytics collects, you can now ask it directly. So for example, here we've got what was my top viewed events page in April 2026. What the Analytics AI does is it tells you it's thinking. It says, I'm pulling information from these places, and then it just gives you the answer. So some other examples of that would be what channel drove the most engagement. So again, normally you might have to work through a couple of reports to get to this. You might have to pull a couple of levers to get the results that you want. Analytics Advisor takes all of that kind of know-how away and just presents you with the answer. Again, it also presents you with its thinking. So if you want to see how it came to this conclusion, you can go into the thinking and actually see the reports that it used. And then it usually gives you a link to the most relevant report at the end as well. Another example of this, what was my top viewed events page in April 26? So actually that was from the previous screen. And you can get much more conversational. So for example, where is the biggest drop-off point in the user journey between viewing a product and completing a purchase? This was actually a question that Google Analytics prompted to me. If I was asking, I would probably say something like, what's the biggest drop-off point between an events page or a what's on page and an order confirmation page? But it kind of didn't really matter in this case. It understood the context, and it's given me those pages where the biggest drop-off is happening during the purchase path. So a really nice tool. And a really nice example of where Gemini is being introduced to a product so that you don't have to copy paste back and forth between one system and another. So that's search engines, but something a lot of people would have experienced probably already using Google, or the fact that you're using maybe ChatGPT more than a search engine now, is that the search results in AI don't always look as we expect them to, or don't look as we're used to from something like Google search. And this is a kind of newish term called AI search optimization. And it's looking at how this data manifests itself within an AI chatbot and how it's different to traditional search. So what is AI search optimization? Very quickly, it's the practice, or at this point, the understanding of making your brand and content discoverable, cited, and recommended by AI-powered search like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity. So to help understand, it's useful to compare some features like primary goal, keyword strategy, content format between traditional SEO, which we all have some understanding of, and this new field, AI SO, which has slightly different metrics and slightly different outputs. So the primary goal, for example, for traditional SEO would be to click through to your website. With AI SO, it's more about getting a mention, making sure that you're being mentioned, and then understanding what the brand sentiment is. Your keywords traditionally might have been a couple of keywords for people to find you, best wedding venue in an area. In an AI SO, people are more likely to say, I'm looking for the best wedding venue in this area, help me out. And the AI will normally give a more natural answer back than just lists of venues in the area. Content format, I'm going to skip, but we are going to put something in the chat and in the list of links that we send you later. It's a report by Google, and it's talking about content formats. There's two different areas of thinking at the moment. Some people think that you do need to repackage some of your content for LLMs, large language models, which is essentially just another name for an AI. Google in the last couple of days has said you don't need to do this. Your current efforts to write articles, blogs, and create content that is for human consumption is actually what you should be doing for AI. So we'll link that report in the chat and then in the sheet that we send around later. Metrics and source, these are probably the two most important ones, I think, to get your head around at this stage. So the metrics for traditional SEO are your really classic numeric outputs, traffic volume, page views, click-through rate, very measurable. And there's a free version to find what these are, obviously in the form of Google Analytics or something like Microsoft Clarity. With AI SEO, it's a little bit more complicated because people are not clicking through as much. It's more about, are you being mentioned? And this is often abbreviated to share of voice, or as we said before, getting the mention, and also brand sentiment. So as we see in source, traditional SEO is relying on your website. AI SEO is relying on other people's websites and what they're saying about your brand, because the AI wants to give a much more contextual answer rather than just pulling the information from your website. So how do you find out what AI is saying about you? There are two ways. I'm going to talk about paid for platforms first. So the example I've been using is a platform called Peak AI, but there are many available. Peak does offer a nice free period though, so that you can see what it looks like and how it works. So how it does work is on the initial setup, it finds out what kind of company you are, and it will then say, these are the kind of prompts that we're going to be searching on. And then you can choose which search engines or which AI engines you want to pull prompts from. So I chose Gemini and ChatGPT. And then this is the kind of breakdown that it's giving. So in this report, I've asked how many times is HDK being mentioned and what kind of prompts are making HDK come up in people's search results within an AI chatbot. So we've got things like list top-rated web developers for UK theatres. We also have a column there called brand sentiment, and this is what's telling us whether we're being talked about favourably and how favourably. And then position, because some of these prompts do actually prompt a list being generated, it's telling us where in that list we've been positioned. Another really nice tool in these platforms is, as we saw before, the source for how chatbots are talking about you is not so much your website anymore. So this report is telling us that HDK has been mentioned on the 10.4 design website, and also really useful for us to know, the AMA website. So when people are asking ChatGPT or Gemini, what's a really great company who can help me build a website in the arts and culture sector, we know that these are the websites that are having an impact and talking about us. And then finally, on this section in the paid for platforms, you can actually drill into individual prompts that people have made. So someone on Gemini would have made the prompts, recommend agencies specializing in cultural sector websites. And the answer that Gemini gave back speaks generally about what the cultural sector is. And then it mentions us in a list of other digital agencies, and it mentions what our strengths are. And you can see again, then it's got a sentiment value of 81, which is a nice high number. We like to see that. On the right, it also provides the sources. And again, this is AMA that's providing the data for this search result. What if you don't want to pay for a platform, or you just want to maybe give it a go yourself without getting too involved with something like Peak? There is a kind of DIY way of doing this. It's pretty simple. You come up with a couple of prompts and you simply ask one of the AI chatbots, what do you think of our company? You do need to be a little bit strategic about this. So here are some steps that I would recommend. Pick some very broad metrics you'd want to measure. So this might just be, are you being mentioned or not? Is the sentiment about you favorable or not? if you ask a prompt that includes geography, so best attractions in my area, are you being mentioned or not for an area where you believe you should be mentioned? Choose which prompts you want to run and which AI platforms to use. So I'd say be quite consistent with these, have the same 3 to 5 questions, put them into the same AI platforms, and then run those once a month. And it's important that you do it in incognito mode so that it's not basing its answers on any of your previous searches or any of your previous search history. And then finally, record your results so that month on month you can see if it's improving, whether you're being mentioned or not, and what the brand sentiment is. So then finally, I wanted to finish off with maybe a more practical example of how AI is being used on websites. There are quite a lot of plugins that mention their use of AI, but when you drill down, it's more that AI was used to produce the plugin, and it's not really using AI then in the way that a user of the CMS can use the plugin. But one that I have found that's come out very recently is one called AI Experiments, and this has been developed by WordPress itself. This one is a little bit more involved. You do need a paid for version of one of the chatbots because you will need to produce an API key. You do also need to be on version 7 of WordPress, and there are a few other criteria that it's contingent on. However, if you're not on WordPress 7 or you don't meet these other criteria, as long as you do have a paid for version of one of the chatbots, you can actually use a sandbox environment that WordPress have provided. And again, the link for this will be in the chat and it will be in the list of links that we send around afterwards. Once you have connected your AI chatbot to the sandbox environment or to your staging site, you actually get this list of options for the types of tasks that the AI can do for you. So again, this is integrating Google Gemini into your website, and you can do things like alt text generation, excerpt generation natively within the CMS without having to copy paste bits of information into Gemini. What that looks like on the front end, and this is just a very small example. Let's say I had a title of Welcome to HDK. If the rest of the content was talking about, say, our new branding, I could click on regenerate, it would read the copy, and it might generate a new title that's something like Welcome to our new branding. And again, you can use this regenerate on copy, even images, to regenerate new content there within WordPress. So it's a pretty powerful plugin. Certainly one to check on the sandbox environment if you do have a paid for version of one of the AI plugins. So finally then, our recommendations in summary. Like Ben was saying earlier, be experimental. It's a really great time to be experimental. We currently have almost unfettered access to multiple AI chatbots. So use the different ones as well. Use ChatGPT, use Gemini. See what different outputs you get to the same prompts, because it's quite interesting to see if one will mention you and another one won't. At the same time, be very mindful. Obviously, we don't 100% know how these AI chatbots are being built and how they're using existing data or data that's being put into them. So obviously be mindful of never putting in sensitive data, customer data, any of that kind of data. You want to make the prompts quite broad so that if somebody else saw them or if they appeared in something like PKI, there's no personal identifiable information there. And then the last one is just to consider your AI SO strategy. It might be DIY. It might just be thinking about the fact that a lot of people, especially young people, 16 to 24-year-olds, are not using traditional search anymore. They're moving over to ChatGPT and Gemini, and they're getting more direct results. So you do want to consider how AI SO might be impacting your business versus traditional search engine optimization. So with that, I'm going to hand back over to Hans, who is going to talk us through ethical and sustainable use of AI.
Thank you, John. So I'm very conscious that we're running a little bit over time with the content, so I'm going to touch on this. But I also, recognise that Alan earlier on in the chat said that one of the most frustrating things for him is the lack of joined up thinking of how it can be used in the workplace in a responsible, ethical, and suitable manner. And I think all of us, everyone who's spoken so far, Ben, Ajay, and John, have touched on this as a topic in various ways, and John just referring to it just now. So I just want to summarize really what the sort of points that have been coming out through these different sections in 4 basic principles. So this is about how we can be using AI well. After all, we are professionals, so we need to be holding ourselves up to high standards. I think my first principle that I drew out of the other topics earlier on is that human judgment is always going to matter here, and it's really important that we hold ourselves accountable here, and we make sure that however we're using these tools, that our judgment is still being used to check things as well. I think another principle that was coming out was about the tone of voice, and I think there's some chat going on with Amelia and about tone of voice, how important it is if we're using all of these tools, if we're all using the same tool, how do we stop our copy becoming generic, that we're all saying the same thing? What can we be doing to avoid that and protecting the authenticity of our uniqueness through our voice as well? Coming back to Alan's point about governance and ethics, and making sure that what we do is always accessible, that we are conscious of bias, of privacy of data, copyright, all of those sort of things, and having those policies in place. People like the AMA have been helping people to think about how they can write those AI policies. And then finally, I think this was picked up in the chat as well, or certainly in the introductions, thinking about the use of AI and how we can be overusing it, about the tools that we're using, and making sure that we're thinking about it in a mindful way, that we're not overusing it where we don't need to, but also those questions around sustainable. And that's obviously, these are all big topics in their own right. So those are just prompts and reminders, and maybe 4 principles that I think are always worth having in mind. And it feels like we've talked about them in various ways throughout. If I was going to sum up before we get on to the discussion today, we've been sort of looking at how AI is changing digital expectations with our audiences, with our stakeholders, with our team, and how good websites will always adapt thoughtfully. What I want to do before we finish is there's a lot of thoughts and lots of ideas that have been presented to you today, and you've taken the time to use this hour to think about AI for yourself. There's lots of ideas, things that you might not have thought about before, things that you've already thought about, being prompted again. I'd love you to put in the chat, if there's one thing that you were going to take forward today, just focus on one thing, what would that be from the things that you've been hearing today, things in the chat, things that you've been prompted about? If you could put those into the chat now, we'd love to see those, because they might inspire other people here or what they might want to focus on. So I'll just go quiet for a few seconds just to get those answers coming into the chat. Maybe there were too many ideas for you to focus down into one, but Maria says, AI in the analytics. Mine is a fairly newish site and had not noticed it was integrated there as yet. Yeah, I think that's certainly one of the things that I've only recently discovered. I hear the answers are starting to come through. Experiment with some of the chat box to redo our web copy. Yeah, I think that's a really good one. And I love the idea of, I've certainly been doing it, trying things in Claude, then seeing how their response works in Gemini as well. Continues exploration to evolve and gain knowledge. Plugins, and that was a new idea for Joe Silver. I'm going to research those further. Start putting together an AI policy, and I think I saw a link to from Jacqueline for the Arts Marketing Association example of a policy. So thanks for sharing that. Looking at AI in Google Analytics, I think that's a really good one. Yeah, a few of those are coming through. Susanna says, I'm still very unconvinced about the ethics of AI, but I will be developing our AISO strategy to ensure that we can show up where our audiences are. Keep those coming through. I think people can read those. I just want to say that there's a lot of things there. HDK are talking to our clients about these things all the time. If it's something you think we can help with, we would love to talk to you about those things further. So there was a lot of chat going on there, and I think there's probably a few things we can pick up on straight away. But while we do, if you've got some questions, put them into the chat box. I saw that Ben was answering a few of them already, and I was trying to chip in with a few of those as well. I'm just going to pick them at random here.
Think if I'm going through it was Amelia on tone of voice. I'm not quite clear on what exactly maybe I got the wrong end of the stick about what exactly you were asking. So if you want to put your fresh message in there, that'd be great. But basically, what I'd understood from that, I think the question that I understood was how do you get it to draft copy that's appropriate for each sort of medium, while respecting your brand. And my suggestion in the chat was I would actually refine a prompt for each type of medium for each part of your brand. I mean, he's just given her the new question, so I wasn't how you have targeted tone of voice for your paid social. Okay, but then they'll all come to the same landing. I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah. So in that case, I would actually say you're probably better off having separate landing pages for each one, and that might be a lot more effort. But if you're going to have targeted tone of voice for each paid media ad you're running, I would actually invest the effort in making sure that they align to the same place. So if you're targeting, I'm just going to take an example. If you're targeting 16 to 24-year-olds and 24 to 35-year-olds, and you're running ads of both demographics, I would actually make a landing page for each one that aligns with the tone of voice that you've put in the ad copy there. But for anyone else in the room that's playing with that, I would recommend it's tended to just have like one brand agent that's just like your whole tone of voice. And that will get you a long way. But I would actually go one step further and recommend having one tone of voice for paid social, one tone of voice for your website, one tone of voice for your print copy, and then really isolating that so it's just really tight and what's the word? Specific.
And I guess AI can help. Obviously, AI can, and Claude is a great one for tone of voice, I would say, at the moment. I don't know what other people's experiences, but I think that's probably the one that's nailing it more than others. But these things, I guess, change over time as well. And Claude has emerged recently as the one that seems to be getting that really well. But also, I guess, you're not wanting to change very dramatically different, but you're wanting AI to help you with those sort of nuanced changes that are still within your brand, but targeted towards those audiences. And I guess putting in the profile information that you've got on those different audiences will help to suggest how you can tweak and experiment. And again, I guess there's lots of opportunity for using AI to help test what works and what doesn't work with those, perhaps, as well.
Yeah, and giving examples of the like the best practice example is always a really good move in your prompt. So, you say this is my tone of voice, then that will get you so far. But if you say this is my tone of voice, and here's three examples of tweets that went viral, or of the pages with the most traffic, then it can learn from that positive experience. I'm just conscious there was quite a lot of chat about environmental
Yeah.
and
Yes.
sort of ethical use. I do have some things to contribute on that, which is I think I linked it already, but I'm a big fan of a sort of emerging company called Green PT. Um, I'm just going to give them a shout out because they're the only company I've found who can verify that the models they're running run on sustainable infrastructure. So they're based in the Netherlands, and so the EU, and so there's a regulatory positive there in that they're fully GDP compliant. And a lot of the times I hear people talking about just using Copilot because it's the only one that's GDPR compliant, but this one is also GDPR compliant. And what's more is that they can give you a little dashboard on how your use of their AI models, um, how much energy you're burning and therefore CO2. And they've done all that maths for you. So you can literally see your impact. And as an internal tool, like I will be upfront, it's not as advanced as Claude or ChatGPT because they're using open models and they're fine-tuning them. But it's a massive step forward. And I do think they're really worth a look. So I'd encourage that.
Lovely, yeah. Were there any other questions? If there are any other questions, do you want to just repost them at the end of the chat? Because it's hard to scroll back to see to find them. But I think I remember those two questions.
Yeah, I'll just also mention that yeah, Andy, it's in the chat. Just the edges kindly linked that there. I'll just also come back on some of the. You will see lots of scary stats saying it uses this much water and this much energy. And I have to say, from the reading I've done, yeah, a lot of that's true. What's not true and what I would challenge is that the the majority of the energy burn is actually burnt in the original training of the model. The other part that's really energy intensive is the image and video generation. Chat is relatively low intensity in terms of the emissions it burns. And unsurprisingly, they're not being very public about the impact that it is having. I agree it's a negative impact, but that's why I recommend more ethical, sustainable providers where available.
Lisa, will you provide a handy summary of the AI tools mentioned today together with what to use them for, please? I am dyslexic. So yes, I think I said I would definitely do that. We were planning to do a handout, but I'll certainly bear in mind what you've said as well and adjust it as best we can for that as well. But yeah, we'll do that. And then before that, Maria was saying most of what people do these days are on data centers, including keeping files in the cloud and watching Netflix and accessing social media. It feels odd that there is so much anti-AI in regard to data centers specifically.
Yeah, and I've just put 100%. I mean, the stats about energy usage from AI and from training AI, they're not real. They're completely, that people have done the research. They are bad. Um, but we're living we're all living in the world, and watching 3 hours of Breaking Bad is gonna far, be a net negative than chatting with ChatGPT for an hour. Um, I'm very happy to speak to anyone that would like to have continue that conversation because I've got various articles and research that I can send you, which maybe you'll find interesting.
Right. Thank you, Ben. So thank you. We have gone over time. We don't normally do, but I think it was really great to make sure we preserve the discussion time. I want to say a big thank you to the panelists here today, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. It was great to have your input in the chat and the discussion points. And as I said, we will be sharing the notes and the recording afterwards as well. So I just want to say thank you very much. I'm going to finally just leave the link to our AI benchmarking survey. We would love you to click on that, link to it, and fill that out as soon as you can after this. And we'll be sharing, as I said, the results with all the people who complete that. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope to see you at a future webinar. Thank you very much.